Hi guys, in the first part of this video we looked at how gods look like us. Okay, we were asking the question, why are the gods like us? Okay, and what we saw, like when you're looking at the Abrahamic god, and the Abrahamic god covers Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And even when you look at certain Hindu sects, because Hinduism also has sects, we have gods like Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Those are actually male gods. And if you look at ancient Greek and Roman religions also, we had gods like Zeus and Jupiter, who are predominantly male gods. And in the Norse mythologies, we had gods like Odin and Thor. Okay, those are dominant male gods. A number of them had goddesses, but what we need to remember is that during the agrarian revolution, a lot of religions had female goddesses. You see, like in Egypt, we had Isis, and even in the ancient Near East, we had Asher and so on. And the earliest references of Yahweh had a consort. Okay, the consort of Yahweh was Asherah also. That one is in ancient inscriptions. And even all deities in Babylon and in Mesopotamia, it was pairing male and female. But as conquest began and the world, uh, people got means of travel, then we had civilizations conquering each other, and military conquest became the way of acquiring land and resources and power. So most societies became more militaristic, and they migrated towards having male deities. As we move towards monotheism, we also gravitated towards male gods, and these male gods were anthropomorphic. Those who have not watched the first video, I'd ask you to do so. And anthropomorphism is the attribution of human behavior, human characteristics, human emotions, and human thoughts to non-human entities like gods. Okay, so we looked at in the first part, we looked at why we anthropomorphize, okay, how we anthropomorphize gods, and today we are going to look at why we do that. I'm going to give you 5 reasons why we present gods as human entities or human-like entities. Okay, so the first one we find in Hector Garcia's book. He has a book called The Alpha God, and Hector Garcia uses a lot of evolutionary psychology, particularly from primatology. If you look at Hector Garcia's Alpha God, he says that the first reason why we anthropomorphize gods is because we have a deep-seated evolutionary and psychological mechanisms. Okay, and if you look at as human beings, we are primates, and if you look at primates, then we find that most primate groups that are led by a dominant male. And one thing about having a dominant male in a group, and this is something you also see in lions, buffaloes, and so on, the way to avoid costly conflicts is through submission. Okay, how do you show submission to the alpha male? You show submission by averting their gaze, by bowing, by sacrificing food to them, and even by surrendering your procreation rights. And that's why we say that Hector Garcia is very big that circumcision was chosen as a covenant with God, because it's a way of indicating surrender of your reproductive powers to the alpha God, and to the alpha male who wants to control reproductive access. It's a primate behavior, and even in ancient kingdoms, we had eunuchs in the castles led by where the kings were. So they used to castrate the male or the young males in the kingdom, so that to make sure that all the women in the harem or in the kingdom or in the palace were impregnated only by the alpha male, who is the king. Okay, so Garcia says that male dominance hierarchies are near universal in all human societies, and that is one reason why we anthropomorphize God as God the Father. Okay, in the Lord's Prayer we say, "Our Father who art in heaven." So God is a father, And Garcia says we anthropomorphize him as a father because most of societies in the world universally, they are led by a dominant male. And part of this it was because of evolutionary pressures. Most societies, during as we evolved towards Iron Age, Stone Age, Bronze Age, and so on, societies that succeeded and that conquered were led by dominant males. So this is one of the reasons why, for us, we project the ultimate authority now in religion as a dominant male also, and that's why God is the father. And David Bass, who is also the father, is considered by many to be the father of evolutionary psychology. In his book, The Evolution of Desire, he also says that evolutionary pressures, they favor males in high leadership positions. So that's one of the reasons, because of the our deep-seated evolutionary and psychological mechanisms. And Garcia also calls it the paternal reinvestment theory, because male figures are associated with protection and punishment. And so this enables God to play the dual roles. God can bless you, God can also punish you. So paternal investment theory is used to explain why we project the deities or the dominant deities as male figures in most religions. And there's also the attachment theory, or the attachment evolution and psychology of religion. There's a psychologist called Kirkpatrick who wrote a book called Attachment, Evolution, and Psychology of Religion. He says that God is projected as a father figure because um, humans project early caregiver dynamics onto deities or onto gods. Okay, so that's the first reason why human beings anthropomorphize gods or deities as fathers or as male figures. The second one, of course, is just a fear response. We are surrounded by human beings. As human beings, we find ourselves in a very vast universe that doesn't care about us. And it doesn't care because maybe some people don't know this, but if you look at the geological record, the species that are existing on the earth today is only 1% of the original number of species that once lived in the earth after the Cambrian period, okay? After the Cambrian explosion. So we've had two extinction events. One was caused by a meteor, the one they say killed the dinosaurs, and there's also one that was caused by volcanoes, okay, that killed so many species. And we, of course, have earthquakes, we have tsunamis, and so on. There was an earthquake in Haiti, I think it was in 2011, that killed 200,000 people. So when human beings saw how much we're exposed to a universe that doesn't care about us, and because of our psychological behavior that I'll explain shortly, we decided that the best thing to survive, the best way to survive in this universe was to show submission to gods, and that's why the Aztecs used to sacrifice virgins and children to the gods. So we are trying to appease these gods that we believe exist. And I'm going to explain why we attribute the events that we see around us to gods. So a lot of it was just to signal compliance, obedience, because of our primate behavior and evolution. So you find that we have these acts of worship, acts of sacrifice, and acts of submission to gods. We bow before them. And I spoke about mountain gods. Most religions started with gods living in mountains. If you look at the Old Testament, Moses goes to Mount Sinai to commune with God. The Greeks had Mount Olympus and several other religions. The Kikuyus in Kenya have Mount Kenya where they believe Ngai was dwelling. So human beings believe that when you submit to a god, you are clarifying rank and you avoid a costly conflict. And through compliance to them or by submission to them, you hope that they'll favor you. Because that is how primates interact. When you submit to an alpha male, they protect you and they provide for you, and you become part of their tribe, so they can protect you from other dominant males. So that is the second one. The third one was need for comfort and security, and this one was addressed by Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud wrote a book called The Future of an Illusion. And he said that religion is a coping mechanism for helplessness. He said God is a father figure to play a protective role. Okay, this is similar to what I said earlier. I'm going to quote Freud. He said that the gods must exorcise the terrors of nature, reconcile men to the cruelty of fate, and particularly death. So Freud says that we create religions to mitigate existential fears. We have a lot of existential fears, fears about our own mortality, about the uncertainty of the universe, and the unpredictability of nature. We don't know when you are going to die. We don't know when the next tsunami or volcanic eruption or earthquake is going to occur. So we created God to mitigate against those. Okay? And we fashion these gods as father figures so that they can protect us against the vagaries of nature of the elements. So that is what Freud said. He said that God play the role of comforting and protective figures. Then there's David Hume, who wrote a book called The Natural History of Religion. He said that we anthropomorphize gods to explain and control terrifying natural causes and provide psychological comfort. So that is the third reason, the need for comfort and security. The fourth reason is as the human mind has a tendency to attribute human qualities to natural phenomena. When we see something happening, we normally want to attribute agency. And this is why we had what we call animism. Animism was a primitive form of religion. We still have it in various forms where we can look at the sky. There's a book called Faces of the Sky. Maybe I'll mention it later. Faces in the Sky, sorry. Where we look at the clouds and we think maybe there's a message there. We used to look at the stars. Remember the story of the five wise men who came to see baby Jesus? There is a thing about astrology where human beings have always looked at the sky and tried to decipher what do they mean, what are they trying to tell us. There are people who look at the earth, they also try to make sense of it. Others look at water and so on, depending on the tribe, depending on the phenomena that's around. Others look at the mountains. Remember, for example, Thor under the Norse was the Norse mythology. Thor was the god of thunder. And if you look at the story of Noah's Ark, the ancient Jews also thought that the rainbow symbolized some sort of covenant with God. So we have a tendency to attribute human qualities to natural phenomena. And this is something that David Hume said. We tend to see agency and intentionality in the environment. And I think this is because of how we interact. Like when a dog is about to bite you, it's going to snarl at you, it's going to bark at you. And so through animism, when you look at a tree and it starts shaking, you start thinking maybe there's something in that tree, it's possessed, and so on and so forth. And so in the same way, we conceive gods as having human-like qualities, human intentions, human agency, human desires, and human thoughts. Yeah, there's a psychologist called Guthrie who wrote a book called Faces in the Clouds, and he said that anthropomorphism is a cognitive strategy for human beings. It's a default cognitive strategy. He said that human beings form the human behaviors and forms are the most familiar and accessible templates for us as human beings. So we use those templates and we project them to gods. Okay, that is why God has a dwelling place called heaven. God keeps a record of the sinners and the people who do good. Okay, but the reason we normally keep records is because our memory is not perfect. Okay, or we want to transmit things to other generations. But God doesn't need to keep a record because God is omniscient, he can remember, he cannot forget. But we project this to him. God is supernatural and God is also immortal. But we still give him mortal qualities like having a child. He has a son who he sacrifices and so on. There's a psychologist called Boyer who wrote a book called Religion Explained. He said that our brains are wired to interpret the world in terms of human-like agents. So that is just how we are wired. We look at things, we find intentionality. Okay, if you went to a house, that's why we say a house is haunted. Human beings have this thing where they say this is a haunted house. We talk about the haunted forest and so on. So it actually derives from human beings deriving agency to inanimate phenomena, and that and now of course goes into gods and deities. So Barrett says that religion is a survival driven. He also says there's a survival driven mechanism in human beings, okay, in our cognition. and it tends to attribute agency to phenomena. It's called hyperactive agency detection device. So it's called hyperactive agency detection device, HADD. That is also used to explain why our brains attribute agency to phenomena that we see around us. Okay, so that's another reason why human beings attribute anthropomorphize gods. The fifth one is wish fulfillment. This is similar to the earlier because this is from Sigmund Freud. He said that we project human aspirations to anthropomorphic deities. So the things we want, we create gods that are like us, who understand our desires, and then we project them to these gods. Freud said that gods embody our desires for justice, immortality, and moral order, and also with the father figure, where we use the father figure as a benevolent authority. So we have a benevolent authority that is very strong and powerful. He can punish, but he only punishes bad people. Okay, so he says that was a form of wish fulfillment on the part of human beings. I'm going to quote Freud. He says that the gods are created by human wishes and they serve to fulfill those human wishes. That is why we created the gods. There's a psychologist called Atran. He wrote a book called In Gods We Trust. He said that humans attribute human like qualities to gods to make them relatable social agents that fulfill our emotional needs. Okay? And anthropomorphism is a mechanism that we human beings use to align divine beings with human values, which reinforces moral frameworks. So it's like we integrated, we know we have human desires for morality, we know we have human desires for justice and so on. So we created anthropomorphic gods and aligned them to these human desires. So that is wish fulfillment. The sixth one, there's something called integration of the psyche. This is a bit technical because it was done by Carl Jung. If you remember, Carl Jung rejected the idea that our brains are tabula rasa. Carl Jung actually came up with the idea that we have what we call the collective unconscious. And he says that the collective unconscious is a collection of archetypes that are picked through our evolutionary past and history. For example, you find many people are instinctively afraid of the dark. Sometimes some people are afraid of snakes and so on. So he says that in our collective unconscious, the father figures emerges. Okay, and he says it's a personification of the self, which represents the individual's own sense of authority, morality, and protection. And Jung says that creating religion or father figures enables us to connect with our own deeper aspects, with the deeper aspects of our own psyche. So it's a way of integrating the individual. There's what we call integrating the individual. Those who've done shadow work, maybe I'll have another section for segment for it, where you have the animas, the id, and so on. When you integrate your personality and you become a fully integrated individual, then you find that you're not getting triggered, you have a much more stable self, and so on. But that's a bit technical. So that's the other reason why we anthropomorphize the god. So these are some of the reasons why we have anthropomorphism across all religions. We find that we have gods represented as human beings. You know, in Hindus, in Abrahamic religions, all gods they speak. Someone today asked on social media, how did God uh, name? Even the first people that he created using the alphabet that was created by human beings. You know, language was created by man, and so on and so forth. There are a lot of questions that arise when you look at the way we've anthropomorphized our gods across all cultures. So those are some of the reasons. And in summary, there's wish fulfillment. There is the desire to control our environment, and then there is also, of course, our cognitive tendency to attribute agency to our environment. When you look at a mountain, we want to think that this mountain has intentions, and we want to think that there's a god in that mountain, and so on and so forth. So that is part of what I'm going to be covering in Unplugged for those who are interested in learning more about why we anthropomorphize gods and how we anthropomorphize gods, particularly the Abrahamic God, who is the one we find in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. You need to get a copy of Unplugged 4. I'll see you on the next one.